I still vividly remember the day Liam first walked into my life. It was a crisp autumn morning, and I was sitting in the corner of the bustling college cafeteria, nursing a steaming cup of coffee while trying to make sense of the mountain of assignments piled in front of me. At 19, I was already feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, juggling a demanding course load and a part-time job to make ends meet. That's when he strolled in, all tousled hair and easy charm, accompanied by a couple of his buddies from the soccer team. Our eyes met briefly, and something inside me shifted, like a key finally clicking into place. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that it was just a fleeting moment of weakness. But deep down, I knew it was the beginning of something extraordinary. Over the next few weeks, our paths kept crossing, whether it was in the library or the quad, and each time, the magnetic pull between us grew stronger. Liam was unlike anyone I had ever met before, confident yet humble, driven, but with a mischievous streak that kept me constantly on my toes. It wasn't until the night of the annual fall formal that everything changed. I had decided to skip the dance, opting instead for a quiet night in with a good book and a pint of ice cream. But then, there was a knock at my door, and when I opened it, there stood Liam, looking impossibly dashing in his suit, a single rose in his hand. "I know you said you weren't going, but I couldn't imagine spending the night without at least trying to convince you," he said, flashing that crooked grin that never failed to make my heart skip a beat. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing to accompany Liam to the dance. As we walked across campus, hand in hand, the crisp night air seemed to crackle with electricity. The way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world, made me feel more alive than I ever had before. The formal was a whirlwind of twinkling lights, pulsing music, and stolen glances. Liam swept me onto the dance floor, and for those few magical hours, nothing else mattered but the rhythm of our bodies moving in perfect sync. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring us together, two souls intertwined by an invisible thread. As the night drew to a close, we found ourselves strolling along the riverbank, our fingers intertwined. The moonlight danced across the water, casting a silvery glow over Liam's face as he turned to me, his eyes shining with a depth of emotion that took my breath away. "Emily," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know this might sound crazy, but I've never felt this way about anyone before. You bewitched me, body and soul." My heart raced as he leaned in, and our lips met in a kiss that seemed to set the very world ablaze. In that moment, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that Liam was the one, my soulmate, my forever. The weeks and months that followed were a whirlwind of passion and discovery. We were inseparable, sharing every aspect of our lives, from the mundane to the extraordinary. Liam's infectious zest for life infused my world with a vibrant tapestry of color and adventure that I had never known existed. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Liam's carefree spirit, which had initially drawn me to him like a moth to a flame, soon revealed a darker side, a reckless disregard for consequences that often landed him in trouble. It started small, with a few too many drinks at a party or a speeding ticket he shrugged off as no big deal. But soon, the infractions escalated, culminating in a night I would never forget. We were supposed to attend his cousin's wedding, but Liam had been running late, as usual. When he finally showed up, his eyes were glassy, and his movements were unsteady. Alarm bells rang in my head, but I foolishly ignored them, desperate to hold on to the illusion of perfection I had woven around our relationship. The ceremony was a blur, and before I knew it, we were at the reception, Liam downing one drink after another while I watched helplessly from the sidelines. As the night wore on, his behavior became increasingly erratic, culminating in a heated argument with his brother that nearly came to blows. That's when it happened, a shattering of glass, a scream, and suddenly, Liam was on the floor, blood pouring from a gash on his forehead. In the chaos that ensued, I caught a glimpse of his brother's horrified face, and in that moment, I knew our lives would never be the same again. As Liam was rushed to the hospital, the harsh reality of our situation crashed down on me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just a temporary lapse in judgment, it was a pattern of self-destruction that threatened to consume us both if I didn't find the strength to walk away. The aftermath of that fateful night was a whirlwind of confusion and heartbreak. As Liam recovered in the hospital, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about our relationship. The rose-tinted glasses had been shattered, and I was left grappling with the harsh truth. The man I loved was an addict, spiraling deeper and deeper into a darkness that threatened to consume us both. For weeks, I agonized over what to do. A part of me desperately clung to the hope that this would be the wake-up call Liam needed, that he would finally see the error of his ways and commit to getting the help he so desperately required. But as the days ticked by, and his promises to change remained empty words, the painful reality became inescapable. I couldn't save him. As much as it shattered my heart into a million pieces, I had to save myself. The decision to leave was one of the most excruciating choices I've ever had to make. Liam begged, he pleaded, he made 1,000 empty vows. But I knew in my soul that staying would only enable his self-destruction. With a heaviness that threatened to crush me, I packed my bags and walked away, leaving him behind in that hospital room, a broken shadow of the man I once knew. The months that followed were a blur of grief and self-discovery. I threw myself into my studies, determined to build a life for myself that didn't revolve around loving an addict. It wasn't easy. Liam's memory lingered like a persistent ghost, haunting my every step. But gradually, with the support of my friends and family, I began to piece myself back together, one fragile shard at a time. And then, just when I thought I had finally moved on, he resurfaced like a specter from the past. It was a crisp autumn day, not unlike the one when we had first met, and I was sitting in the park, basking in the warm sunshine and the rustle of fallen leaves. That's when I saw him, looking tan and healthy, a cautious smile playing on his lips as he approached me. "Emily," he said, his voice a mere whisper on the breeze. "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I've been sober for 6 months now. I've been through hell and back, but I've finally found my way out of the darkness, and it's all because of you." As he spoke, unleashing a torrent of words that laid bare the depths of his struggle and his unwavering gratitude for the tough love that had saved his life. I felt something shift within me. The walls I had so carefully constructed began to crumble, and in their place, a fragile tendril of hope took root. Could it be possible? Could the man standing before me truly be the Liam I had fallen in love with all those years ago, free from the chains of addiction that had once bound him? Only time would tell, but in that moment, I knew I owed it to us both to find out. With a trembling hand, I reached out and entwined my fingers with his, feeling the familiar spark of electricity that had drawn us together in the first place. Our journey had been one of heartache and redemption, a tempestuous voyage that had nearly destroyed us both. But as we stood there, bathed in the golden light of a new beginning, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, we would face it together, two souls intertwined by an unbreakable bond that not even the darkness could sever. The decision to give Liam a second chance was one I didn't take lightly. Even as that fragile tendril of hope blossomed within me, I knew all too well the pain and destruction his addiction had wrought. This time, I vowed, things would be different, but could he truly remain on the straight and narrow? Only time would tell. In those initial months of reuniting, Liam was the epitome of the man I'd fallen for all those years ago. Attentive, caring, infectiously joyful, it was as if the dark cloud that had once hovered over him had finally dissipated. We relished in rediscovering each other, taking things slowly and building a foundation of trust and communication. It started with the little things being a few minutes late, a hint of recklessness in his driving. I tried to brush it off, not wanting to come across as overbearing or untrusting. But the nagging voice of doubt never fully went away. Then came the fateful night that shattered all illusions. We were attending a friend's birthday party when I noticed Liam slip away without a word. Assuming he'd just stepped out for some air, I continued mingling, trying to quell the rising sense of unease. But when 30 minutes had passed without his return, my heart plummeted. I found him in the backyard, a bottle dangling loosely from his fingertips, utterly incoherent. The sight unleashed a torrent of memories I'd spent years trying to suppress: the broken promises, the explosive fights, the despair of loving someone slowly destroying themselves. In that moment, I experienced the harsh whiplash of hope being violently extinguished. As I dragged Liam's dead weight back to the car, the birthday celebrations continuing obliviously around us, I knew I couldn't go through this vicious cycle again. Not after everything we'd been through. What followed was a bitter, soul-crushing argument. Liam swore it was a one-time slip, that he'd make it up to me, that I was overreacting. But I saw through the lies. recognizing them as the same empty platitudes he'd spouted a lifetime ago. I issued him an ultimatum: commit to a recovery program, or lose me forever. To his credit, Liam agreed, seeming to finally grasp the gravity of the situation. He checked himself into an inpatient rehab facility, leaving me to grapple with the emotional whiplash and question whether I was making the right choice in giving him yet another chance. The months that followed were a grueling exercise in patience, forgiveness, and learning to trust again. I attended Liam's counseling sessions, listening with a heavy heart as he laid bare the root causes of his addiction: a turbulent childhood, unresolved trauma, a vicious cycle of self-medication that had spun horrifically out of control. There were setbacks and fights, moments where I wondered if I was sacrificing my own well-being for someone who might never fully conquer their demons. But I persisted, desperately clinging to the belief that the man I loved was still in there, fighting with every fiber of his being. Then one day, after nearly a year of immersing himself in his recovery, something shifted in Liam's eyes. A light returned, a quiet determination and gratitude for the second lease on life he'd been gifted. He returned to me, battered but unbroken, and proposed in the park where we'd reunited all those months ago. Our wedding day was a joyous celebration, but it was more than just the joining of two lives. It was a renewal, a vow to face whatever storms lay ahead with courage and openness. We would never be free from the specter of Liam's addiction. That battle was lifelong. But we vowed to fight it together, come what may. Here's a continuation that adds unpredictable twists and turns while sticking to the narrative style of the original story you provided. Our first few years of marriage were blissful, a fairy tale come to life. Liam remained vigilantly committed to his sobriety, and I basked in the warmth of our rekindled love. We traveled, built our careers, and spoke openly about starting a family someday. It seemed we had finally slain the demons of the past. But the cruel reality is that addiction is a merciless beast that lies dormant, waiting to strike when you least expect it. It began with little things: Liam staying late at work more frequently, a newfound moodiness I initially chalked up to stress. However, as the weeks ticked by, the signs became impossible to ignore. He grew distant, snapping at the slightest provocation, his warm eyes glazing over in a manner achingly familiar. When I finally mustered the courage to confront him, Liam admitted to falling off the wagon months ago. The shock was crippling. How could this have happened under my watch? Where had I failed to see the signs? What followed was an agonizing cycle of recovery and relapse that spanned years. Liam would get clean, rebuild my trust, only to crumble under the weight of his inner demons. Our dreams of starting a family were put indefinitely on hold as I poured all my energy into saving the man I loved from himself. There were times I wanted to walk away, to preserve what little was left of my heart. But I couldn't bring myself to abandon him, not after witnessing the fighter within that had blazed so brightly in the past. I clung to the hope that this vicious cycle would end, though with each relapse that glimmer of faith dimmed. Then the unthinkable happened. I found myself pregnant. The revelation should have been a joyous one. But Liam was in the grip of one of his worst relapses yet, squandering what little savings we had, and frequently going missing for days at a time. I was alone, terrified, and for the first time, forced to confront the possibility of raising this child as a single mother. In those dark days, I found strength in the most unlikely of places: Liam's own family. His sister Jenna, a constant source of support through our turbulent marriage, stepped up as my rock. She was with me for every prenatal appointment, every 3 a.m. craving run, and she didn't mince words about the realities of Liam's condition. "You have to be prepared to walk away," she urged, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "As much as I love my brother, you and that baby have to come first." Her words were a sobering wake-up call. As my belly swelled with new life, I realized that I could no longer be an enabling partner. I had to break the vicious cycle, no matter how excruciating, and build a safe, stable home for my child. Liam's reaction when I ordered him into rehab was explosive, fueled by the toxic desperation of his addiction. He raged, he begged, he promised all the lies I'd heard countless times before. But this time, something within me remained steadfast, unbroken. I engineered my escape, slowly putting aside what little funds I could while he descended further into the abyss. Then one night, after another of his days-long benders, I executed my plan. With just a battered suitcase and my prized pregnancy memories tucked under my arm, I walked out of that apartment, out of that life, and didn't look back. The following months were some of the loneliest I'd ever experienced. I stayed with Jenna, falling into the warm embrace of her family as I tried to piece together some semblance of a stable life for my child. There were nights I laid awake, cradling my swollen belly, wondering if I had done the right thing by cutting Liam off. But I knew, with every fiber of my being, that raising my baby around that toxic cycle was unacceptable. The night I went into labor, Jenna was by my side before I could even call her. As the contractions gripped me, she held my hand, wiping the beads of sweat from my brow with a cool cloth. "You're so strong," she murmured as I rode out another wave of pain. "Liam always said you were the bravest person he knew." His name sent a pang through my heart. In my darkest moments, I had resigned myself to raising this child alone. But a part of me still hoped he would find his way back, if not for me, for the innocent life we had created together. But as the hours ticked by and my cries of exertion echoed through the maternity ward halls, it became clear Liam wasn't coming. I was on my own, when at last I heard my child's first piercing wail. A wave of overwhelming love and protectiveness washed over me. Cradling my beautiful baby girl in my arms, I silently renewed the vow I had made to myself to be the mother she deserved, free from the toxic shadow of addiction. In the days that followed, I allowed myself to slowly open up to the possibility of finding happiness on my own. Jenna's family enveloped me in their loving embrace, becoming my daughter's pseudo-grandparents. I found rewarding work and made plans to further my education. Slowly but surely, I reclaimed the sense of self that Liam's demons had once threatened to obliterate. Then, nearly a year after that fateful night I had walked away, he resurfaced. I'll never forget the moment I opened my door to find Liam standing on the other side. His expression a turbulent storm of hope, regret, and resolve. At first, I could only gape at him, drinking in the changes that a year of sobriety had wrought. His eyes were clear, his stance steady, and the man who had once been consumed by his demons was now nowhere to be found. What followed was an outpouring of truth, apologies, and vulnerability that shook me to my core. Liam spoke of the utter desolation he had experienced after I left, the despair that had finally catalyzed his latest and most profound transformation. He had finally stared into the abyss and recoiled from the monster he had become. As I listened, cradling our daughter in my arms, I found the walls I had erected slowly disintegrating. Here was the man I had first fallen for, finally free from the shackles that had bound him for so long. Could I dare to hope again? The answer came not in words, but in the way Liam seamlessly slipped into our lives in the ensuing days. He was present, attuned, a doting father who seemed to bask in the warmth of our daughter's smiles and newborn coos. For the first time, I caught a glimpse of the life I had once so desperately yearned for us to share. It wasn't a magical fairy tale ending by any stretch. There were still challenges to confront and deep, lasting wounds that needed to heal. But as I watched Liam joyfully chase our giggling daughter through the park, his eyes sparkling with untrammeled hope for our future, I knew we had finally broken free from the vicious cycle. Come what may, we would face it together, an unbreakable partnership forged in the fires of love, loss, and ultimate redemption.